Welcome to Verse in the Bible, your trusted source for uncovering what the Bible truly teaches and how it compares to modern-day church teachings. Let's dive in and discover the truth together. For more details, please visit verseinthebible.com. Okay, let's unpack a truly mind-bending idea today. Imagine, just for a moment, that the very ground we walk on, the ancient ruins archaeologists dig up, the geological formations, imagine they could actually whisper secrets. Secrets that maybe provide real, tangible, compelling evidence for the accounts we read right there in the Bible. Now, for a long time, the academic world, it's often viewed these biblical narratives with a degree of skepticism, right?
Right, often relegating them to myth or legend. Interesting stories, perhaps, but not necessarily a factual history.
Exactly. But what if? What if the most profound, the most undeniable evidence for God's existence, for his interaction with humanity, what if it isn't hidden in complex philosophy or theology? What if it's literally buried in the earth itself? What if archaeology and geology aren't just about understanding old cultures, but are actually powerful tools that back up the Bible's stories? Yeah, that really challenges how we usually think about these things, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And what's really fascinating here is how this perspective just fundamentally challenges those conventional thoughts, those academic assumptions. It suggests that fields like archaeology, geology, they aren't just, supplementary to biblical studies.
Yeah.
They might provide profound, actual concrete insights into these ancient texts, insights that frankly demand a thoughtful response from anyone looking honestly at the evidence. We're sort of moving beyond assumptions here into what the physical earth tells us.
So tangible evidence.
Tangible evidence. So for this deep dive, our mission really is to explore 12 specific archaeological discoveries. And these aren't just interesting curiosities from history. They seem to stand as physical testimony to God's direct intervention in human history. They really invite us to a deeper, evidence-based investigation. We're talking solid stuff, things you can examine, study, observe in the real world.
Right.
So for those of you listening who maybe have grown weary of the mainstream narratives, the ones that tend to dismiss biblical truth as, I don't know, primitive superstition, or maybe you feel that faith and facts are somehow worlds apart, well, prepare to encounter evidence that truly demands a response. This evidence, it challenges those prevailing assumptions about history, about faith. It's about stepping back, really, and just letting the facts, the undeniable things unearthed from the ground, speak for themselves. It could potentially reshape how we understand both history and scripture.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. So let's just jump right in then. 12 unmistakable archaeological proofs. Where do we start? Maybe with one of the most dramatic accounts of God's judgment in the Bible. One, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
The eternal furnace of God's judgment. Yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah. The biblical destruction described there is one of those vivid, almost terrifying examples of God's judgment. You read about cities just utterly consumed by fire and brimstone, an entire region wiped clean.
Total devastation.
Exactly. And for many, it sounds almost too fantastical, right? Too cataclysmic to be real history. Surely an event that big couldn't leave a lasting physical scar centuries later, could it? What if the ground itself still testifies to it?
Well, the biblical narrative is incredibly explicit. If you look at the word of God in Genesis chapter 19, verses 24 and 25, it reads, "Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground."
Wow.
It's not presented metaphorically. It's described as a direct, catastrophic intervention, something that utterly transformed the landscape, extinguished all life there. The language suggests complete annihilation.
Okay, so the text is clear. How does archaeology connect with that?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Down at the southern end of the Dead Sea, archaeologists have identified several ancient sites. One prominent candidate, Tal el-Amamam, is proposed by many scholars now as the biblical city of Sodom. And at this site, and in the surrounding areas, what they've unearthed is, well, it's quite remarkable. We're talking about literally millions of sulfur balls.
Sulfur, like actual brimstone.
Essentially pure brimstone, yes, embedded directly into thick layers of ash. And these aren't just trace amounts. Chemical analysis shows they reach an astonishing 95 to 98% purity.
98%?
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Not at all. That kind of purity is virtually impossible through any known natural geological process on Earth. Natural sulfur deposits, they always have significant impurities. This is something else entirely.
Okay, so incredibly pure sulfur balls. What else?
Well, many of these sulfur pellets, they appear encased in these sort of crystalline capsules.
That's
Yeah, it shows undeniable evidence of exposure to extreme, like flash heat conditions, extremely high temperatures, followed by very rapid cooling and preservation. It's as if they were intensely burned, then almost immediately buried in ash, perfectly preserving this unique geological signature.
so not just a fire, but like an incinerator event.
Exactly. The sheer volume, the purity concentrated in this specific region, it points to something far beyond a typical volcanic eruption or a natural wildfire.
That purity level and the flash heating evidence,
Yeah.
it's just astounding. It really
Yeah.
does suggest something that defies normal geological explanation.
Hmm.
And it's not just the materials found, right? You mentioned the landscape itself.
That's right. The landscape itself is like a silent, enduring witness. The area today remains this barren white ashland. Virtually nothing grows there.
Still, after all this time.
Still, the soil is infertile, it's parched, chemically altered in a way that suggests a profound, localized environmental catastrophe. It hasn't recovered. It's like a permanent scar.
Wow.
And this precision, the specific location matching biblical candidates, the unique geological anomalies like the pure sulfur, the lasting barrenness that matches the biblical description with startling accuracy, it feels like physical evidence of God's judgment preserved across millennia for us to examine today.
So it takes it out of the realm of pure legend.
It really does. It transforms a narrative often just seen as legend into something palpable, a verifiable historical event. It strongly suggests an external powerful force was at play, exactly as Genesis describes. It really forces you to ask, what natural phenomenon could possibly account for such specific, unique, and lasting evidence? 2. Red Sea chariots. Pharaoh's army entombed in the deep.
Okay, so from cities destroyed by fire, let's move to another incredibly famous, almost iconic miracle, the parting of the Red Sea.
Yeah.
This story, the Israelites escaping Pharaoh's army, it's been a cornerstone of skepticism for centuries.
Absolutely. A prime target.
Yeah, critics have long just relegated it to mythology. It's too grand, too supernatural, too impossible, they say, to be anything but a story. But what if the seabed itself holds the answer? What if Pharaoh's drowned army is literally entombed down there, leaving undeniable evidence?
Well, again, the Bible's account in Exodus is very clear, very dramatic. After the Israelites crossed on dry ground, Scripture records exactly what happened to the pursuing Egyptians. Exodus chapter 14, verse 28 says, "Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained."
Complete annihilation.
Total. The text is explicit. And this is where underwater archaeology, particularly in the Gulf of Aqaba, has presented a narrative that starkly contrasts with that skeptical view.
The Gulf of Aqaba specifically,
Yeah.
not the main body of the Red Sea.
Correct. The Gulf of Aqaba branch, divers there, notably led by the late Ron Wyatt, made some incredible discoveries in the depths. They found coral-encrusted chariot wheels.
Really? Chariot wheels?
Yes, and skeletal remains that are clearly human, plus horse bones scattered across the seafloor. But what makes these finds particularly compelling isn't just that they're there, it's the design of the chariot wheels.
What about the design?
Many of the recovered wheels have distinctive 4, 6, or 8 spokes. Now, these specific designs precisely match those used by the Egyptian armies during the 18th dynasty.
And the 18th dynasty is significant because
That's the dynasty widely accepted by historians and Egyptologists as the most likely historical period for the Exodus event itself. So the artifacts match the time frame.
okay, that specific dating and design, that's crucial, isn't it? It's not just finding random old stuff. It's finding Egyptian artifacts from the right historical period, exactly where the Bible suggests a crossing might have happened.
Exactly. It's forensic evidence, in a way. Finding 18th dynasty chariot parts is a significant link, and you're right, their distribution isn't random either.
How are they distributed?
These artifacts aren't just scattered everywhere, they predominantly lie along a natural underwater land bridge. It stretches across the Gulf of Aqaba, specifically from a place called Nuweiba Beach.
An underwater land bridge.
Yes, the seafloor rises quite dramatically there compared to the surrounding depths, creating a sort of underwater ridge or pathway across the Gulf. It aligns perfectly with a plausible crossing point described in the biblical accounts. It suggests the Israelites crossed at a point where a path could have been miraculously cleared, and then the waters returned, trapping the army on this raised section.
And it's deep on either side.
Extremely deep. It plunges to over a mile on either side of this underwater ridge. So this narrow bridge is really the only geographically feasible route for any kind of mass crossing in that area.
Okay, so for those who've long doubted the Red Sea crossing as just a myth, what does this really mean? We're potentially looking at a drowned army found at the precise location, with artifacts matching the specific historical period. It makes it much harder to just dismiss, doesn't it?
It undeniably shifts the conversation. It transforms that skepticism, often based on a lack of evidence, into a situation where there's compelling archaeological validation. When you put it all together, the specific chariot designs, the human and horse remains, the perfect geographical alignment with this unique underwater land bridge, it really brings that verse to mind. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Wow. It turns what many considered a purely faith-based miracle into a historical event with potentially profound physical residue. This evidence really pushes us to rethink the boundaries of what we consider historically possible, especially when an ancient text accurately described an event that seems to have left such precise physical traces. 3. Creation's testimony. The intelligently designed cosmos.
Okay, so we've looked at these dramatic, singular events, the destruction of cities, the parting of a sea. Let's maybe zoom out now, look at the bigger picture, creation itself. The Bible presents the entire cosmos, the universe, as God's primary, constant evidence for his existence and his power.
A foundational testimony.
Right. And what's incredible is how modern science, far from disproving these ancient claims, has actually uncovered complexities that the biblical writers could never have imagined back then.
Yeah.
Yet these complexities seem to align perfectly with the biblical idea of an intelligently designed cosmos.
Absolutely. The Bible consistently points to creation as this profound declaration of its creator. You see it clearly in Psalm chapter 19, verse 1, which states, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork."
It's poetic, but it's making a factual claim too.
Exactly. It's not just beautiful language. It's asserting that the sheer vastness, the intricate order, the beauty of the universe, it's all a perpetual, visible testament to God's magnificence and existence. It's like a constant broadcast speaking across all cultures and times.
Okay.
And then Paul elaborates on this in Romans chapter 1, verse 20. He explains, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse."
So the evidence is so clear, nobody has an excuse not to see it.
That's the implication. The very fabric of existence, the observable order, the complexity, the design we see everywhere. It speaks so clearly of a creator that, according to Paul, no one can truthfully claim ignorance of God's presence or power. There's an inherent self-revelation built into the natural world.
Okay, so how does modern science connect with these ancient ideas?
Well, think about the concept known as the fine-tuning of the universe. It's become a huge topic in physics and cosmology. Scientists have identified numerous fundamental physical constants and initial conditions, things like the strength of gravity, the electromagnetic force, the precise mass of a proton.
The basic building blocks and forces.
Exactly. And it turns out these values had to be exquisitely balanced, just incredibly precise for the universe to even be able to support life. Even a tiny variation, a minuscule tweak in any one of these fundamental values would have resulted in a universe completely incapable of forming stars or planets or chemistry or ultimately life.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take the strong nuclear force, the force that holds atomic nuclei together. If it were just 2% stronger, no hydrogen would have formed in the early universe. No hydrogen means no stars like our sun, no water. If it were just 2% weaker, no elements heavier than hydrogen would have formed. No carbon, no oxygen. In either scenario, life as we know it is simply impossible.
Wow, just a tiny percentage difference makes that much of a change.
It's incredibly sensitive. The probability of so many independent variables aligning perfectly just by random chance is astronomically small. It's not just one lucky coincidence, it's this whole cascade of precision.
And these are discoveries that ancient writers, obviously with no telescopes or particle accelerators, could never have conceived of. Yet they resonate deeply with those biblical declarations of an intelligently designed cosmos.
They absolutely do. Or think about the intricate systems that allow for a habitable planet like Earth. Our precise distance from the sun, the Goldilocks zone allowing for liquid water, the specific tilt of Earth's axis, giving us stable seasons, our planet's magnetic field shielding us from harmful solar radiation, the exact atmospheric composition we need to breathe.
All critical for life.
Critical. And none of them seem like random occurrences when you see how perfectly they fit together. Now, the Bible, centuries before we understood astrophysics or planetary science, touches on these very themes. Think about Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18. It says, God did not create the earth in vain, who formed it to be inhabited.
Implying purpose.
Exactly. A deliberate purpose behind the design of the universe and our planet, not just random cosmic luck.
What about the idea of Earth's stability versus the movement of the sun and stars? The Bible talks about that too, doesn't it?
It does. For instance, Psalm chapter 104, verse 5, speaks about God establishing the earth on its foundation so that it would not be moved forever. Now, obviously, we know the Earth rotates and orbits the sun.
Right.
But the stability of that orbit, the stability of its axial tilt, the consistency of its physical parameters over billions of years, that underlying stability is precisely what allows life to flourish. It speaks to a foundational order. Similarly, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 5 describes the sun's consistent, cyclical journey, rising, setting, hurrying back, emphasizing the predictable, enduring rhythms of the cosmos.
So the ancients observed this regularity.
They observed the regularity and attributed it to God's design. And verses like Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 to 14, where Joshua commands the sun and moon to stand still, imply that the sun and moon normally move from our perspective. Psalm chapter 19 describes the sun's circuit across the heavens. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22 describes God sitting above the circle of the earth, with the heavens stretched out like a tent again, emphasizing God's authority over a stable earth and dynamic heavens. Job chapter 38 contrasts the moving dawn with the stable earth.
So the deep dive here isn't just about reading old verses. It's seeing how these ancient declarations of an ordered, purposeful creation find these incredible echoes in the staggeringly complex, finely tuned universe that modern science keeps uncovering.
Precisely. It's a profound declaration of order and purpose, suggesting a grand designer behind it all, establishing the laws and movements that maintain the cosmos. It really forces us to confront the question: how could ancient texts articulate such profound truths about a created order, truths that resonate so deeply with 21st century physics and cosmology, unless there was an intelligent, purposeful creator behind it all? It makes the idea of the cosmos being just a random accident much harder to accept. 4. Noah's flood. Earth's geological testimony.
Okay, now let's tackle one of the biblical accounts that probably faces the most skepticism, the most dismissal, especially in academic circles: Noah's flood.
Right, the worldwide flood narrative in Genesis.
Exactly. It's often categorized as, a localized Mesopotamian flood myth, or maybe hyperbole, or just pure legend. Conventional geology, with its emphasis on slow, gradual processes over millions of years, uniformitarianism makes a global catastrophic flood seem, well, impossible to many.
The standard model doesn't easily accommodate it.
Right, but what if? What if the geological formations we see all across the Earth actually preserved undeniable evidence? Evidence of catastrophic water events that align remarkably well with the scriptural descriptions. It sounds like a bold claim, but maybe the Earth itself has a different story to tell than the one we usually hear.
Well, the biblical account itself, it's really uncompromising in describing a global catastrophe. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 is very specific. It says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened."
Fountains of the great deep. That sounds like more than just rain.
Much more. It describes this unprecedented release of subterranean water, possibly massive geological upheavals releasing water from below, combined with intense global precipitation. The text points clearly to a truly worldwide event, not just, a big river flood in one region.
Okay, so the Bible describes a global catastrophe. Where do we see geological evidence that might challenge the purely gradual uniformitarian view?
Well, let's look at some specific formations. Take the Grand Canyon, for instance. It's iconic. The conventional explanation involves the Colorado River slowly carving it out over millions of years.
Right, that's what we're usually taught.
But the canyon itself exhibits compelling evidence that suggests rapid water erosion on a massive scale. You see evidence of quickly deposited, immense sedimentary layers laid down one after another without signs of long erosion periods in between. The sheer scale of the canyon, the layered rock formations, the evidence of massive water flow needed to carve it. Many argue it's actually better explained by catastrophic flood conditions, not slow, gradual processes.
So the layers themselves suggest rapid deposition.
In many cases, yes. The boundaries between many layers are often flat and distinct knife-edge contacts, they're sometimes called, rather than showing the uneven, eroded surfaces you'd expect if millions of years passed between them. This points towards rapid deposition in water.
Okay, the Grand Canyon is one example. What else?
Consider what are often called global fossil graveyards. These aren't just isolated fossils here and there. All across the planet, we find these vast deposits containing literally billions of creatures, marine creatures, land creatures, all mixed together.
Mixed together.
Yes, often jumbled in massive layers, buried in positions that indicate sudden, catastrophic burial, not slow accumulation over eons. You find fish fossilized in the act of eating other fish. Huge collections of diverse animals buried together, sometimes thousands of miles from their natural habitats. This points to an event powerful enough to overwhelm entire ecosystems, transport organisms vast distances, mix marine and terrestrial life, and bury them rapidly under immense layers of sediment before they could decompose.
That doesn't sound like slow and gradual accumulation.
Not at all. That's the pattern you'd expect from a massive watery catastrophe, not steady sedimentation over millions of years.
That's a really striking image. Billions of creatures mixed up, buried together suddenly. You also mentioned something called polystrate fossils. How do they fit in?
Yes, polystrate fossils. These are perhaps one of the most direct challenges to the idea of slow, gradual geological ages spanning millions of years.
What are they exactly?
Imagine finding a fossilized tree trunk standing upright, vertically penetrating through multiple distinct layers of rock layers that are conventionally dated as representing perhaps millions of years of deposition.
A tree trunk going through millions of years of rock layers.
Exactly. Now, for a tree to remain upright and preserved through supposed millions of years while these layers slowly built up around it, it's basically impossible. It would rot, decay, fall over long before it could be buried gradually over such vast timescales.
Right.
So the existence of these polystrate fossils strongly suggests rapid catastrophic burial. Sediments must have piled up very quickly, encasing the entire tree relatively suddenly, preserving it in that upright position before it could decompose. And we find these formations, like coal seams containing upright fossilized trees, worldwide. It indicates rapid burial, inconsistent with slow and gradual theories.
Okay, so for those who've always dismissed the flood as just a local myth, what does this all mean? We've got the Grand Canyon's erosion patterns, these global fossil graveyards, the polystrate fossils. It seems like the Earth itself might be preserving powerful evidence of catastrophic water events that really do align with the scriptural descriptions.
It certainly presents a direct challenge to the purely uniformitarian dismissal. It invites us to fundamentally reconsider the prevailing theories of geological formation and Earth's history.
It's compelling.
The implications are significant. These findings present such a strong physical testimony to the kind of rapid, massive water-based event described in Genesis. It's not about trying to force the evidence into a biblical box. It's about acknowledging how remarkably well the physical evidence on the ground seems to fit the biblical narrative. It suggests a global catastrophe that left an indelible, observable mark on our planet, a mark that resonates powerfully with the flood account in Genesis. 5. The Exodus. Historical records testifying.
Right, let's shift back to a specific historical event, the Exodus. Another huge foundational story in the Bible, the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But, like the flood, it's faced decades of skepticism.
Right, often viewed more as Hebrew mythology than historical fact.
Exactly. A key argument from critics has been the perceived lack of corroborating evidence outside the Bible itself, especially from Egyptian sources, which are usually quite detailed about their own history, right? They didn't seem to mention losing a massive slave workforce.
That's been the standard critique, yes. The argument from silence.
But what if that's changing? What if Egyptian records and archaeological discoveries are actually starting to line up with the biblical timeline and the narrative details? Could the Exodus be moving from mythology towards corroborated history?
Well, the Bible itself gives us a pretty solid timeline anchor. If you look at 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, it states, "Now it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, that he began to build the house of the Lord."
Okay, so that gives a time frame relative to Solomon.
Precisely. That specific dating allows historians to place the Exodus event roughly in the middle of the 15th century BC, and that time frame corresponds generally to Egypt's powerful 18th dynasty.
Okay, 15th century BC, 18th dynasty. Do we have Egyptian records from that period that hint at, well, chaos?
Intriguingly, yes. There's an ancient Egyptian document known as the Ipura Papyrus. It's essentially a lament, a poem describing a time of immense upheaval and social collapse in Egypt.
What is this?
It vividly describes calamities, rivers turning to blood, Darkness covering the land, plague, famine, the breakdown of social order, servants becoming masters, the rich losing everything, widespread death. The language is poetic, of course, but the descriptions resonate remarkably strongly with the accounts of the biblical plagues.
Wow. Rivers to blood, darkness. That sounds familiar. And the timing.
The estimated date of the papyrus's composition aligns broadly with that proposed Exodus period, around the end of the Middle Kingdom or early New Kingdom, overlapping the time frame. It suggests some kind of major crisis did indeed strike Egypt around that time, a crisis consistent with the idea of divine judgments.
That's a powerful connection, especially since, as you said, Egyptian records usually boast about victories, not national disasters. To have an internal lament describing such devastation, aligning in time and description with the plagues, that's significant.
It is significant. While it doesn't explicitly name Moses or the Israelites, the parallels are hard to ignore.
Okay, so we have a suggestive text. What about archaeology? Evidence for the Israelites in Egypt before the Exodus.
This is another crucial piece. Consider the site known as Avaris in the eastern Nile Delta. It's widely identified by archaeologists as the likely location of the Israelite settlement in Egypt, the biblical land of Goshen, where Jacob's family settled.
Okay, Avaris. What do they find there?
Excavations at Avaris have revealed fascinating evidence. For a significant period, there was a large Semitic population living there, people culturally distinct from the native Egyptians, consistent with the Hebrews described in the Bible. They had distinctively Canaanite or Hebrew-style cultural artifacts, architecture, burial practices. They were clearly a significant foreign group integrated into that part of Egypt.
So evidence of the Israelites living there. What about evidence of them leaving?
This is perhaps the most striking part about Avaris. The archaeological record shows that this large Semitic population, well, they abruptly disappeared.
Disappeared. How abruptly?
Very abruptly. It wasn't a gradual decline, not assimilation into Egyptian culture. It was a sudden, dramatic demographic shift. The evidence suggests a rapid departure, leaving behind clear signs of abandonment. There's also evidence of destruction and abandonment at the site around this time, which could align with the plagues and the hasty departure.
A sudden mass departure of the Semitic population.
Exactly. That suddenness is a key detail that resonates incredibly strongly with the biblical narrative of a mass exodus, a rapid flight from Egypt.
Wow. So that sudden demographic shift, the disappearance from Avaris, it corresponds precisely with the Bible's account of the departure. It's not just a subtle hint, it's a dramatic change in the archaeological record mirroring the scriptural story. That feels like strong external validation.
It really does. So if you connect the dots, Egyptian texts like the Ipuwer papyrus describing calamities, archaeological sites like Avaris showing a Semitic presence followed by a sudden departure, it increasingly supports the biblical timeline and narrative. This evidence starts to transform the Exodus from something often dismissed as purely Hebrew mythology into an event with plausible, corroborated historical and archaeological backing.
It certainly demands a serious reevaluation.
Absolutely. It suggests a historical reality for a people who were present in Egypt, likely experienced hardship, and then left dramatically all consistent with the biblical account. 6. The power of God's law. How the Ten Commandments affirm biblical truth.
Let's talk about the Ten Commandments. They're foundational, obviously, for Judeo-Christian ethics, and they've hugely shaped Western law and morality. But again, we hit that wall of skepticism sometimes.
Right. The argument that they weren't unique.
Exactly. Yeah. Academics often argue that the Bible just borrowed from earlier, more extensive law codes in the ancient Near East, like the famous Code of Hammurabi from Babylon. They suggest the whole idea of law, even specific rules, wasn't original to Israel.
That's a common perspective, yeah.
Yet, when you actually compare biblical law to these other ancient codes we know about thanks to archaeology, does the biblical law actually reveal something unique, something profoundly different about its character and ethics that challenges that borrowing idea?
It really does. And the Bible itself emphasizes the unique source of these laws. Exodus chapter 31, verse 18 describes that moment on Sinai. And he gave to Moses, when he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God.
Written with the finger of God. That implies a direct godly origin, not just human legal tradition.
Precisely. It suggests a qualitative difference right from the start. Now let's look at those other ancient Near Eastern codes. Documents like Hammurabi's Code, which dates to around 1754 BC, were certainly impressive legal frameworks for their time.
They were quite detailed, weren't they?
Very detailed. But their primary focus was largely on maintaining civil order, protecting property rights, and, crucially, enforcing a rigid social hierarchy. Justice wasn't always blind in those codes.
How so?
Well, they often prescribed different penalties depending on your social status. For example, injuring a nobleman carried a much heavier penalty than inflicting the same injury on a commoner, or especially a slave. Justice was stratified. It reflected and reinforced the existing social pyramid.
Okay, so older codes reflected the hierarchical societies they governed. How did biblical law, the Ten Commandments, and the broader Mosaic law diverge from that? Was it really revolutionary?
It was fundamentally revolutionary in several ways. Biblical law introduces concepts that go way beyond just maintaining order and protecting property. Firstly, it emphasizes the equal worth and dignity of all human beings before God.
Equal worth in that era.
That was radical. It fundamentally challenged the rigid class structures prevalent everywhere else. Imagine a legal system where the king and the peasant, the free person and the servant, were held to the same fundamental moral standard before the ultimate judge. And they had similar protections under God's law. This idea of universal human dignity derived from being made in God's image was almost unprecedented.
That is a huge difference. What else?
Secondly, biblical law explicitly prioritizes the protection of the most vulnerable members of society. There are repeated commands to care for widows, orphans, foreigners, the people most likely to be exploited or overlooked.
So social justice was built in.
Absolutely. It showcased a deep sense of social responsibility and compassion that was largely absent or minimal in other ancient legal systems, which often reflected the interests of the powerful. Biblical law wasn't just about punishing crime. It aimed to foster a just, merciful, and righteous society. It encouraged people to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God, aiming for an inner transformation, not just outward compliance.
And the penalties were consistent regardless of status.
Largely, yes. Unlike contemporary codes that often had sliding scales based on social rank, the core principles of Mosaic law applied consistent moral standards regardless of economic or social position. That concept of equal justice under law wouldn't really resurface widely in legal systems for millennia.
So that's the key distinction then. Biblical law wasn't just practical rules. It was this foundational, universal, ethical framework promoting justice, mercy, human dignity. Way ahead of its time.
Exactly. It was truly transformative. The distinctiveness of biblical law, which becomes even clearer when archaeology lets us compare it directly with other ancient Near Eastern legal texts, highlights a godly wisdom and ethical framework far advanced for its era. It points towards a transcendent source, not just human invention or cultural evolution.
Makes you wonder where those ideas came from.
Precisely. The fact that these principles advocating for universal justice, the care of the vulnerable emerged in a world dominated by hierarchy and power speaks volumes about their unique, arguably God-inspired origin. It certainly challenges the idea that it was merely borrowed or derivative. 7. David's kingdom. The Tel Dan still an archaeological validation.
King David. He's such a central figure in the Bible, revered, foundational for Israel's history and messianic prophecy. Yet, for many decades, especially in critical scholarship circles, there was serious doubt about whether he even existed as a historical figure.
Right. The argument was often made that he might be more of a mythological hero, like King Arthur, perhaps.
Exactly. A literary construct, maybe invented later to give Israel this glorious founding king. And a key piece of their argument was the perceived lack of any extra-biblical evidence, any mention of him outside the Bible itself.
That lack of external corroboration was a major point of skepticism.
It made the whole idea of a powerful Davidic kingdom seem, well, questionable to some. But then, archaeology stepped in. A discovery was made that basically shattered that entire line of argument, proving the ground could testify to David's reality.
It was a game changer. Of course, the Bible consistently speaks of David as a real pivotal historical figure and of God's enduring covenant promise with him. Think of Psalm chapter 89, verses 3 and 4. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn to my servant David, your seed I will establish forever and build up your throne to all generations.
So the Bible presents him as the founder of an eternal dynasty.
An eternal dynasty, implying a real historical person and a kingdom that would endure. Now, the groundbreaking archaeological find happened up in northern Israel at a site called Tel Dan back in 1993.
Tel Dan. What did they find?
An archaeologist named Avraham Biren unearthed fragments of a large basalt stone, a stele, and inscribed monument. This fragment, now famously known as the Tel Dan stele, dates back to the 9th century BC.
Okay, so about a century or so after David's traditional reign.
Roughly, yes. The inscription itself is written by an Aramean king widely believed to be Hazael of Damascus, and he's boasting about his military victories over the Kingdom of Israel and its allies, which in itself was significant confirmation of the conflicts described between Aram Damascus and Israel in the Bible.
So finding an inscription from a rival king mentioning victories over Israel was already important. But there was one specific phrase on that broken stone that just electrified the academic world, right? What was that crucial detail?
That was the absolute bombshell. The crucial part, the phrase that really rocked biblical studies and silenced many critics, was its explicit mention of the House of David.
The House of David, written right there.
Written right there in ancient Aramaic script by WD. This was the first clear, unambiguous, extra-biblical reference ever found, not just to a figure named David, but specifically to the Davidic dynasty, the royal house founded by King David. For decades, the absence of this very phrase outside the Bible was Exhibit A in arguing against David's historicity.
And now here it was.
Etched in stone. By an enemy king, no less. This wasn't just some internal Israelite record, it was external recognition by a contemporary foreign power, acknowledging the dynasty founded by David as a significant political entity he fought against.
That is just phenomenal. So this find didn't just, hint that David might have been real. It basically demolished decades of criticism that he was merely mythological. A single artifact provided solid archaeological proof supporting his existence and the reality of his kingdom.
Absolutely. If you connect this to the bigger picture, the Teldown stele validated not only David's historical existence, but also the recognition of his royal lineage by contemporary foreign powers. It confirmed that the House of David was a known, significant political reality in the ancient Near East, exactly as Scripture describes.
It moved him from legend firmly into the historical record.
Unequivocally. It forced a profound reassessment within biblical scholarship. This stele stands as powerful, tangible proof that the biblical narratives about King David and his kingdom are rooted in historical reality, not just later religious fiction. 8. The Temple Mount. Archaeological evidence of Solomon's temple.
Okay, sticking with the monarchy, let's talk about David's son, Solomon, and his legendary temple. The Bible's descriptions are just epic. A structure of unparalleled grandeur, covered in gold, cedar, precious stones, a marvel of ancient architecture.
Truly magnificent, according to the text.
But that very magnificence, the sheer scale described in the Bible, has often faced, you guessed it, academic skepticism. Critics argued, well, could ancient Israel in the 10th century BC really build something that elaborate? They questioned if Israel had the engineering know-how, the resources. Maybe the descriptions were just exaggerated later on to glorify Israel's past.
That's been a common line of argument, yes, questioning the capacity for such monumental construction at that time.
So what does the archaeology actually reveal? What have we found on and around the Temple Mount itself that might speak to these grand biblical claims? Does the evidence support the scale described?
Well, the Bible certainly paints that vivid picture. 1 Kings chapter 6, verses 14 and 15, for example. So Solomon built the temple and finished it. And he built the inside walls of the temple with cedar boards. From the floor of the temple to the ceiling, he paneled them on the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the temple with planks of cypress. It speaks of size, opulent materials, sophisticated construction.
Okay, that's the description. What's been found?
Archaeological discoveries on, and perhaps more importantly, around the Temple Mount, especially in excavations near the retaining walls of the current platform, have started to bring these descriptions into sharper focus.
Like what specifically?
Excavations have uncovered massive stone blocks, especially in the lower courses of the retaining walls, like the western wall. These aren't just, average building stones. Many weigh hundreds of tons.
Hundreds of tons. Single blocks.
Yes. Some of the largest are estimated at over 500 tons. These blocks are consistent with what's known as Solomonic era or First Temple period construction techniques, characterized by these huge, finely cut stones, often with distinctive drafted margins, sometimes called bosses.
So the sheer scale of those foundation stones, that speaks volumes about the engineering capability, right? How does that challenge the skepticism?
Absolutely. Moving and precisely positioning stones of that magnitude demonstrates an incredibly advanced level of engineering and logistical capability. It aligns perfectly with the biblical descriptions of the temple's magnificence and the overall monumental scale of Solomon's building projects in Jerusalem.
So Israel did have the capability.
The evidence strongly suggests they did. This level of quarrying, transport, and precision construction rivals, if not surpasses, many contemporary civilizations of that period. It directly refutes the claim that ancient Israel couldn't have built structures of such grandeur. They clearly had the skilled labor and advanced knowledge required.
Okay, massive stones. Anything else? Artifacts.
Yes. In the vicinity, particularly in materials sifted from Temple Mount excavations, numerous ritual artifacts have been found dating to the Iron Age, the First Temple period. Things like stone vessels, fragments of small altars, seals, inscriptions, and other religious implements.
What do these tell us?
They provide evidence of the sophisticated religious practices described in Scripture, suggesting a highly organized, elaborate system of worship associated with a major temple complex. These finds collectively point to a substantial, permanent religious structure of great importance and impressive construction during the Iron Age, aligning perfectly with Solomon's reign.
So putting it together, what does this mean for those who doubted? The massive stones, the artifacts, it seems to validate the biblical accounts of Israel's advanced religious and architectural achievements during Solomon's reign.
It absolutely does. It directly challenges that academic skepticism about ancient Israel's capabilities. The physical evidence suggests that such an impressive structure was indeed within their grasp, and the scale aligns remarkably well with the grandeur described in Scripture.
It makes the temple feel much more real.
Exactly. The scale and sophistication of these findings directly corroborate the biblical narrative. It makes the grandeur of Solomon's temple more than just a story or a later exaggeration. It suggests the biblical writers were describing a real, awe-inspiring building that stood as a testament to Israel's prosperity and devotion during that era. These physical remnants compel us to take the biblical descriptions seriously. 9. Fulfilled prophecies. Archaeological confirmation of predictive scripture.
Okay, moving from physical structures like the temple to something perhaps even more mind-boggling. Fulfilled prophecy. The Bible contains numerous predictions about future events, people, and nations. And the claim is that their precise fulfillment, sometimes confirmed centuries later by archaeology, provides powerful evidence of God's inspiration.
Right, the argument being that this isn't just vague prediction, but specific foreknowledge that transcends human ability.
Exactly. Not just good guesses, but detailed prophecies recorded long before they happened.
And the Bible itself presents God as sovereign over time, someone who reveals his plans beforehand. Look at Amos chapter 3, verse 7. It says, "Surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets."
So God tells his prophets what he's going to do.
That's the principle. It establishes that God uses prophets to communicate future events, indicating a deliberate foreknown plan that humans couldn't predict on their own.
Okay, that's the claim. Is there a really strong example where archaeology seems to confirm a very specific prophecy like that?
One of the most striking, undeniable examples is the prophecy concerning Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire.
Cyrus. What was prophesied about him?
The prophet Isaiah, writing around 700 BC, that's about 150 years before Cyrus was even born.
150 years before.
Yes. Isaiah specifically names him and details his future actions. Listen to Isaiah chapter 44, verse 28, who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasures, saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation shall be laid."
Wait, it names him and says he'll rebuild Jerusalem and the temple 150 years in advance.
Exactly. Imagine the sheer audacity of that prediction. Naming a specific future ruler from a nation not yet dominant and outlining his specific policy towards Jerusalem and its ruined temple, which wouldn't even be destroyed by Babylon for over a century after Isaiah wrote this.
That's staggering. Just predicting the name is incredible, let alone the specific actions. So was this amazing prophecy just left hanging, or did archaeology find something?
This is where it gets truly compelling. This incredible prophecy found direct confirmation in one of the most significant archaeological discoveries related to the Persian Empire, the Cyrus cylinder.
A Cyrus cylinder, I've heard of that.
Discovered in Babylon back in 1879, it's an ancient clay cylinder inscribed in Akkadian cuneiform dating to the time of Cyrus's conquest of Babylon around 539 BC.
And what does it say?
Crucially, the cylinder explicitly confirms Cyrus's policy of allowing exiled peoples, specifically those deported by the previous Babylonian regime, to return to their homelands and, significantly, rebuild their temples and restore their religious practices.
It specifically mentions rebuilding temples.
Yes, it describes Cyrus as restoring cult sanctuaries and returning deported peoples to their homes. This policy directly aligns with the prophecy in Isaiah and explains how the Jewish exiles were permitted to return to Jerusalem and begin rebuilding the temple, exactly as recorded in the biblical books of Ezra and Nehemiah.
So we have an archaeological artifact, contemporary with Cyrus himself, detailing the exact policy predicted by Isaiah 150 years earlier. That's tangible evidence of prophecy fulfilled with stunning precision.
It's incredibly powerful evidence. It's hard to explain away as coincidence or lucky guessing. A specific name, a specific policy predicted centuries in advance, then confirmed by an artifact from the time of fulfillment.
It really demonstrates something beyond human foresight.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, predictions like this one, recorded centuries before fulfillment and then confirmed by archaeology, provide truly compelling evidence for supernatural knowledge, for God's inspiration behind the biblical text. It points to a source of knowledge that transcends time, directly validating the claim that God reveals his secrets to his prophets. It profoundly challenges any notion that the Bible is merely a collection of human writings. 10. New Testament sites. Archaeological validation of gospel accounts.
Okay, let's shift gears now, move forward in time to the New Testament. We often hear questions about the historical reliability of the Gospels, right?
Yeah.
Were the places mentioned real? Did the events actually happen in those specific locations?
The historical grounding of the Jesus narrative.
Yeah. Skeptics have sometimes scrutinized the Gospels for their geographical and cultural details, suggesting they might be more theological documents than accurate historical accounts. Maybe the writers weren't really familiar with the first-century Palestine.
That charge has definitely been leveled.
But what if archaeology has actually been doing the opposite? What if excavations have consistently validated the geographical and cultural details in the Gospels, bringing those accounts to life and grounding them in solid historical reality?
That's precisely what seems to be happening. The Gospels provide remarkably specific geographical and cultural context for Jesus' ministry. For instance, Matthew chapter 4, verse 23 describes Jesus' activity. Quote, "Now Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in his synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing." It mentions specific regions, Galilee, specific types of locations, synagogues,
Setting the scene very clearly.
very clearly. And archaeological work throughout Israel has proven invaluable in confirming these details, providing concrete historical settings for the gospel narratives.
Can you give some examples?
Absolutely. Take Capernaum. It was a key center for Jesus' Galilean ministry, mentioned frequently in the Gospels.
Right, Peter's hometown.
Exactly. Well, excavations there have uncovered not only the ruins of the ancient synagogue, where the Gospels say Jesus taught a large, impressive basalt structure from the period.
They found synagogue.
Yes. But they also found what is widely believed to be Peter's house. It's located beneath the ruins of a later octagonal Byzantine church, suggesting the site was venerated early on. And the house itself shows evidence of having been modified into a simple house church, possibly as early as the 1st century.
Oh.
So the structures, the layout of the town found in Capernaum, they match precisely the kind of setting described in the Gospels for Jesus' ministry there, teaching in the synagogue, visiting homes like Peter's. It gives a physical reality to those accounts.
That's incredibly powerful. To think you can stand in the ruins of the synagogue where Jesus likely taught, see the place identified as Peter's house. It makes the Gospels feel so much less like distant stories.
Right.
Are there other examples where archaeology confirmed very specific details? Maybe details critics once doubted?
Yes, another really striking one is the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem. For a long time, some critics doubted the description in John's Gospel. John, chapter 5, verses 2 to 9, describes a pool near the sheep gate with 5 porticos, or covered colonnades, where the sick gathered.
5 porticos. That sounds specific.
Very specific and architecturally unusual. Critics argued such a structure probably didn't exist. Maybe John got the details wrong. But then excavations at the site, starting in the late 19th century, uncovered the actual ruins of a pool complex with, guess what?
5 porticos.
Exactly. A unique 5-portico structure precisely as John described. And they even found evidence suggesting it was used as a place for healing rituals, like votive offerings left behind. It wasn't just a vague resemblance, it was a specific, unusual architectural detail found exactly where the Gospel said it was.
That's incredible validation for John's accuracy.
It really is. And further excavations across Israel continue to validate other details, the layout of 1st century Jerusalem, the existence of specific towns like Nazareth or Bethany, common Jewish burial practices, types of fishing boats on Galilee. The cumulative effect is powerful.
So what does this all mean for the historical reliability of the Gospels? It seems like these excavations are consistently backing up the geographical and cultural details, really bringing the accounts to life.
It means a great deal. When the physical sites, the architecture, the cultural context discovered through archaeology match the gospel narratives with such detail and precision, it significantly confirms their historical reliability. It suggests the writers were intimately familiar with the time and place they were writing about.
It lets you walk where Jesus walked.
In a very real sense, yes. It allows us to experience the settings of the Gospels as real historical places, inhabited by real people, not just mythical backdrops. This archaeological validation provides a robust framework that grounds the New Testament in history and strongly supports the accuracy of the Gospel accounts. 11. Dead Sea Scrolls, confirming biblical textual accuracy.
Okay, we've looked at sites and artifacts confirming events and locations. But what about the biblical text itself, the actual words? For centuries, people have wondered, maybe speculated, about how accurately the Bible was copied and transmitted over time.
Right, the question of textual corruption. Could significant changes have crept in over hundreds, even thousands of years of copying?
Exactly. Given the huge time gap between when the books were originally written and our oldest manuscripts before the 20th century, how can we be sure the Bible we read today is faithful to the original? It seemed like a potential weak spot.
A legitimate question, historically speaking.
But then came one of the absolute biggest archaeological finds of the 20th century, a discovery that provided stunning, unprecedented evidence for the accuracy of biblical transmission across millennia.
You're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, exactly.
Yeah.
But first, the Bible itself makes a claim about its own endurance, doesn't it?
It does. A very powerful promise in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 8. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. It speaks to this timeless, unchanging, preserved nature of God's revealed truth, a claim that textual critics often challenged.
Okay, so that's the claim. Now, tell us about the Dead Sea Scrolls and why they were so revolutionary for this question.
Well, the scrolls, discovered in caves near Qumran starting in 1947, are basically a library of ancient Jewish texts, including the oldest surviving manuscripts of many books of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament.
Older than anything known before.
Much older. Among the most significant finds was the Great Isaiah Scroll. It's a nearly complete copy of the Book of Isaiah, and it dates to around 125 BC.
125 BC. Wow. How do they compare to what scholars had before?
Before the Dead Sea Scrolls, our oldest, nearly complete Hebrew manuscripts of the Old Testament were from what's called the Masoretic text tradition, and those dated mostly from around 900 to 1000 AD.
So there was a gap of over 1,000 years.
Exactly. A massive 1,000-year gap between the Qumran Isaiah scroll, 125 BC, and the standard Hebrew text previously available, circa 900 to 1000 AD. That huge gap fueled all the speculation about possible changes and corruption over time.
Okay, so the scrolls bridged that enormous gap. What happened when scholars compared the 125 BC Isaiah scroll with the Masoretic text from 1,000 years later? What did they find?
This was the truly remarkable part. They found an extraordinary degree of consistency. Despite that massive 1,000-year separation in time, the text of the Isaiah scroll from Qumran was remarkably, almost identically consistent with the Masoretic text from a millennium later.
Really? After 1,000 years of hand copy?
Yes. The variations that did exist were overwhelmingly minor. We're talking about things like slight differences in spelling, what scholars call orthography, minor grammatical variations, or occasional stylistic changes. Crucially, these variations did not affect the overall meaning, the theological message, or the historical narrative of the text in any significant way.
So no major doctrines were different, no big historical changes.
None. It demonstrated an incredible level of faithfulness in transmission, a testament to the meticulous care taken by the ancient Jewish scribes who copied these sacred texts over centuries.
That's just astounding. So this discovery provided unprecedented, tangible evidence, archaeological evidence, for the accuracy of biblical transmission. It basically destroyed the arguments about widespread textual corruption over time.
It really did. It offered concrete proof that the Old Testament text we have today is remarkably faithful to the text used by Jewish communities long before the time of Jesus.
So connecting this to the bigger picture?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Dead Sea Scrolls highlight the incredible care and reverence with which these sacred texts were copied and preserved. This archaeological discovery validates the reliability of biblical transmission in a powerful way. It gives us profound confidence that modern readers possess essentially the same Old Testament text that ancient believers treasured centuries ago, reinforcing that biblical claim that God's word truly does stand forever. 12. The resurrection. Historical and archaeological indicators.
Right, we've journeyed through prophecies, texts, ancient cities, battle sites. Let's conclude with the absolute cornerstone of Christian faith, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, obviously, this is presented as the ultimate supernatural event, an act of God beyond natural explanation.
A central miracle, yes.
But it didn't happen in a vacuum. It's rooted in a specific historical time and place. So the question is, are there compelling historical and maybe even archaeological indicators that actually support the gospel accounts of this pivotal event? Indicators that maybe don't prove the supernatural aspect, but certainly point towards the historical plausibility and impact of the claim.
That's a great way to frame it. The Bible, of course, unequivocally declares the resurrection as the foundational truth. Matthew chapter 28, verse 6 gives us the angel's words at the empty tomb. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. That's the bold central claim.
Okay, so what historical or archaeological evidence surrounds that claim?
Well, first, let's consider the setting. The burial practices described in the Gospels, a rock-cut tomb sealed with a large stone, typical of first-century Jewish customs for people of some means, are well attested archaeologically. Sites often proposed as the location, like the Garden Tomb or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, both contain tombs and features consistent with first-century Jewish burials.
So the physical setting described is historically accurate.
Yes, it grounds the narrative in known historical and archaeological reality. The type of tomb described fits the period perfectly.
Okay, what about the impact? The immediate aftermath?
This is perhaps even more compelling historically. Consider the rapid, almost explosive spread of early Christianity. Within just a few decades of Jesus' crucifixion, this small, seemingly defeated group of followers in Jerusalem had burgeoned into a significant movement spreading across the Roman Empire.
That growth was remarkably fast, wasn't it?
Astonishingly fast, especially given the persecution they faced. And think about the transformation of the disciples themselves. These were men who, according to the Gospels, deserted Jesus, denied him, hid in fear after his crucifixion.
Right, they scattered.
Yet, very shortly after, these same men were transformed into bold, fearless preachers, proclaiming Jesus' resurrection in the very city where he was executed, willing to face imprisonment, beatings, and ultimately horrific martyrs' deaths for that message. What could possibly explain such a radical, fundamental change in these individuals?
That's a really powerful point. Fearful deserters becoming willing martyrs. Something profound must have happened to convince them so utterly. It's hard to explain if they were just propagating a lie they knew was false.
Exactly. Their unwavering conviction, their willingness to suffer and die for their belief in the resurrection, is a powerful historical indicator that something extraordinary occurred, something they genuinely believed was true.
Were there also early historical accounts from outside the Christian movement itself that acknowledged aspects of this? Maybe non-Christian sources?
Yes, there are corroborating mentions. While non-Christian sources obviously didn't endorse the resurrection belief itself, early historical accounts from Roman historians like Tacitus and Pliny the Younger and the Jewish historian Josephus do attest to several key background facts. They confirm the existence of Jesus, his execution under Pontius Pilate, the existence of his followers, Christians, shortly afterwards, their rapid spread, and their unwavering belief even in the face of persecution.
So even hostile sources acknowledge the movement and the core beliefs.
They acknowledge the existence of the movement, its founder, and the core claim about Jesus, even if they offered alternative explanations like superstition or stubbornness. Some sources even indirectly allude to the empty tomb claim and the disciples' testimony about appearances, even while trying to debunk them. Furthermore, the archaeological record itself shows this explosive geographical growth of early Christianity, exactly where and when the Gospels place these events radiating out from Jerusalem across the Roman world with incredible speed. We find early Christian symbols, house churches, inscriptions appearing very early on.
So, putting it all together, while the resurrection itself is the ultimate supernatural event, these historical and archaeological indicators, the accurate burial practices, the radical transformation and martyrdom of the disciples, the rapid growth of the church, the corroboration from early non-Christian sources, the geographical spread seen archaeologically, they all seem to support the plausibility and impact of the gospel accounts.
Precisely. They don't scientifically prove the resurrection, which is inherently beyond scientific proof, but they create a compelling historical case. They strongly suggest that the resurrection wasn't just a later myth invented decades after the fact. The evidence points to a powerful, transformative event happening right at the beginning, an event that immediately changed lives and launched a world-altering movement.
It certainly gives us much to consider.
It really does. This raises that important question. The sheer historical impact, the rapid growth against all odds, the unwavering testimony of eyewitnesses willing to die. All of it points to some kind of foundational event that demands serious consideration from any honest investigator. It creates a powerful bridge between faith and historical fact, challenging the easy dismissal of the resurrection as mere myth. It forces us to ask, what, other than an actual resurrection, could adequately account for such profound, immediate, and lasting historical consequences?
What an incredible journey this deep dive has been. We've really explored how archaeology and history seem to converge with the biblical narrative in some truly surprising ways. It presents evidence that, honestly, seems to transcend mere coincidence.
It does feel that way sometimes.
From the sulfur-scorched earth near the Dead Sea, potentially marking Sodom, to those coral-encrusted chariot wheels possibly resting at the bottom of the Gulf of Aqaba. And from ancient prophecies like Isaiah's about Cyrus, fulfilled with stunning precision, confirmed by artifacts like the Cyrus cylinder, to the very integrity of the biblical text itself, vouched for by the Dead Sea Scrolls. The physical world really does seem to speak a compelling story.
Tangible evidence.
These 12 proofs we've discussed, they represent physical testimony, preserved in stone, in ash, in artifacts, in ancient texts. It feels like tangible validation of God Almighty's activity in human history, grounding these biblical narratives much more firmly in the historical and geological record than many people realize.
And for those listening, especially those who maybe have felt weary of hearing biblical truth constantly dismissed in academic circles or popular culture, these discoveries offer solid ground, real reasons for confidence in scriptural reliability. It suggests the earth itself bears witness to the reality of God's intervention in our affairs.
Evidence that demands consideration.
Exactly. Evidence that demands serious consideration from any honest investigator. The implications go way beyond just academic debate. They touch the very foundations of how we understand truth, history, and reality itself. It invites us to look at the world maybe through a different lens.
A lens that sees faith and fact potentially intersecting.
Potentially intersecting in powerful ways, which leads to a final thought, really, a question for you, our listener. If these archaeological and historical discoveries validate specific biblical accounts with such remarkable precision and detail, what might that imply about other scriptural claims? Does the physical evidence invite you to a deeper exploration of biblical truth? Does it challenge some of the prevailing assumptions you might hold about the relationship between faith and fact? It compels us, I think, to ask if we've been looking in all the right places for answers, and if our frameworks for understanding history are truly capturing the whole picture.
That's definitely something to ponder. We really encourage you to continue your own journey of discovery. Explore this growing body of archaeological evidence that seems to confirm biblical truth and challenge some of that conventional wisdom about Scripture's historical reliability. There's so much more out there to uncover and understand. For more details on the topics we discussed today and many others, please visit our website, verseinthebible.com.